What happens when an ordinary person like Thomas gets caught up in the infamous Italian Mafia? Thomas is walking down a narrow street in Little Italy. He looks around cautiously, taking in the old buildings and crowded shops. He stops in front of a small cafe, looks up at the sign, and pushes the door open. Thomas walks in, his eyes scanning the room. He spots a group of men sitting in the corner. They glance at him briefly, then go back to their conversation. Thomas is approaching the counter. He takes a seat on a stool, and catches the eye of the bartender, a gruff-looking man with a thick beard. The bartender raises an eyebrow. Thomas orders a coffee, and the bartender starts to prepare it. Thomas looks around the cafe. He notices the men in the corner. They seem to be discussing something in hushed tones. Thomas leans in, trying to listen. The bartender hands Thomas his coffee, and whispers something in his ear. Thomas's eyes widen. He looks at the bartender, then back at the men in the corner. Thomas is getting up from his seat. He walks over to the men in the corner. They look up at him. One of them nods, and Thomas sits down. They start to talk to him. Thomas listens intently. He nods and asks questions. The men seem to be taking a liking to Thomas. They offer him a drink. Thomas accepts, and they clink glasses together. Thomas is laughing. He's telling a story. The men are chuckling and patting him on the back. One of the men, an older guy with a scruffy face, pulls Thomas aside and starts to talk to him in a serious tone. The older guy is explaining something to Thomas. He's using hand gestures, and Thomas is listening carefully. Thomas nods, and the older guy hands him a small piece of paper. Thomas takes it and puts it in his pocket. The older guy pats Thomas on the back and says something in his ear. Thomas smiles and nods. Thomas is walking back to the counter. He orders another coffee, and the bartender raises an eyebrow. Thomas just smiles. The bartender leans in and whispers something in Thomas's ear. Thomas's eyes light up. He looks around the cafe and nods. Thomas is getting a phone call. He answers it and listens for a moment, then he hangs up. He looks around the cafe and spots the men in the corner. They're watching him. Thomas nods and gets up from his seat. He walks over to the men, and they start to talk to him. Thomas listens and nods. They hand him a small package. Thomas takes it and puts it in his pocket. The men pat him on the back and welcome him to the family. Thomas is smiling. He's shaking hands with the men, and they're all laughing. Thomas is walking out of the cafe. He looks around, taking in the sights and sounds of Little Italy. He spots a group of people watching him. They nod, and Thomas nods back. Thomas is walking down the street. He's got a spring in his step. He feels like he's part of something. Thomas walks in. He's greeted by the owner, an old man with a kind face. The old man is showing Thomas around the store. He's explaining the different products, and Thomas is listening intently. Thomas is working in the store. He's restocking shelves and helping customers. The old man is watching him. He's nodding in approval. Thomas is doing a good job. He looks at the old man and nods. The old man pats him on the back. Thomas is walking out of the store. He's got a task to complete. He's got to deliver a package. Thomas is walking down the street. He's got the package in his hand. He's looking around cautiously. Thomas is approaching a large building. He looks up at it and nods. He walks inside. He's greeted by a receptionist. She's smiling, and Thomas smiles back. Thomas is walking to the elevator. He presses the button, and the doors open. Thomas steps inside. He presses the button for the top floor, and the doors close. He spots a group of men. They're standing by a door. Thomas walks over to them and hands them the package. The men are inspecting the package. They're nodding, and Thomas is smiling. They hand him a briefcase. Thomas takes it and opens it. Inside, there's a large sum of money. Thomas's eyes widen. He looks at the men, and they're smiling. Thomas is walking out of the building. He's got the briefcase in his hand. He's feeling proud. Thomas is walking in. He's greeted by the bartender. The bartender is smiling, and Thomas smiles back. Thomas is walking over to the counter. He takes a seat and orders a drink. The bartender is preparing it. Thomas is looking around. He spots a group of people. They're watching him. Thomas nods, and they nod back. Thomas is feeling like he's part of the community, he's got a sense of belonging. Thomas is taking a sip of his drink, he's savoring the taste, he's feeling content. Thomas is getting a promotion, he's moving up the ranks, he's becoming a made man. Thomas is walking into a large room, he's surrounded by men, they're all dressed in suits. They're congratulating him, they're shaking his hand, Thomas is smiling. Thomas is walking over to a table, there's a large feast spread out, Thomas is taking a seat, and digging in. The men are laughing, they're telling stories, Thomas is listening, and laughing. Thomas is feeling like he's on top of the world, he's got the respect of his peers. Thomas is walking out of the room, he's got a sense of pride, he's feeling like he's accomplished something. Thomas is feeling like he's being watched, he's got a sense of paranoia, he's looking around cautiously. He looks around, and spots a group of men, they're standing by the door, Thomas nods, and they nod back. Thomas is walking out of the store, he's got a sense of unease, he's feeling like something is off. Thomas is walking down the street, he's got a sense of trepidation, he's looking around cautiously. He looks around, and spots a group of men, there.